Everybody, thanks for joining another episode of the Point of Sale Data Minute today. I'm happy to have a LinkedIn friend and leader in the point of sale data analytics space, thought leadership, a lot of great content that comes from my guest today, and that is the one and only Scott Kennedy. Thanks for joining, Scott.
Of course, Doug. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Excellent. So what Scott and I are going to talk about today is an article he's recently written on the evolution of the retail analytics and the consumer brand analytics role. During the day, Scott helps lead the BI and analytics team over at Franklin Sports and is, when I say knee-deep, he is knee-deep in point-of-sale data and analytics in general, and like I said, a thought leader in the space. So I'm excited to get into his article today, do a little Q&A back and forth, and just get Scott's thought on where the consumer brand analyst role is headed and what's happening in the workplace for those that are data savvy. So Scott, I'll lead off with my first question here is at the top of your article, and the one that really caught my attention, you say, make way for the new data literate super generalist. I'm curious what you mean by that and how this has changed over the past 5 years or decade that you've been involved in data.
Sure. So the software community has created like a turnkey way to export large amounts of point of sale data from vendor portals and pass it over to brands. This has increased the data availability that analysts have at their disposal now significantly. And with that increased amount of information will drive a need for these analysts to become more literate in their skills. So how they take advantage of this opportunity. So I'm more or less saying that there's a lot more data available and you need to upskill your data literacy chops in order to take advantage of it.
Have you seen, with all the different data sets and the different tools in the marketplace, have you seen this translate over to the hiring and kind of the required skill sets that you see new analysts come in, or when you're hiring for your team, looking for different aspects of someone's skills and knowledge base first?
Yeah. So I can't necessarily speak to what other brands are doing, but personally, when I'm hiring, I am absolutely looking for something that lets me know that the person has the data gene, for lack of a better term. So that could be certifications in, I don't know, something like Google Analytics, for example. Even if they're trying to go for a job that may not necessarily require that, I need to know that they have the capability to learn and become somewhat of a data generalist within the first 4 to 6 months.
Cool. Yeah, I see the whole concept and adoption of data analysts each week in my role, of course, and people hiring more folks on their data team as more data sets become available. And do you think that more organizations are, giving the data person, their data team, a seat at the table now when they're looking to make big corporate decisions and product decisions and retailer decisions, pricing, et cetera? Is that evolving as well?
Yeah, I think the advent of self-service BI has allowed analysts a seat at the table. And what I really mean is there's lots of times where people are in a conference room and they're talking about what decision they want to make. And, 5-10 years ago, it might have taken quite a bit of effort to pull all the data necessary and do the analysis. But with the advent of some of these self-service tools that you're seeing in my example, in Power BI, analysts are able to answer these questions in, a matter of minutes now. And when you're able to stay inside of the discussion and do that what if analysis on the fly during your meeting, it's a huge feather in the cap for analysts, and it's helping them get closer to the decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that's driven by the retailers requiring more information or kind of more thought leadership from their suppliers rather than just going, hey, sales are up or down 10%, our inventory's looking good? What do you think about that?
Yeah, a big part of it is just the technology is getting significantly better. Yes, retailers are demanding more. You're absolutely right. They're expecting more from their analysts, but the technology is just so much better than it was 5-10 years ago. And some of the data models that I'm creating, I have 50-60 million record reports that are churning pretty quickly. That stuff just wasn't really that easy to do a long time ago without like a very, very deep data architecture background and skill set.
And investment, right?
Right, that's true. Yes, absolutely.
One of the sections in your article here, you're talking about everything is connected, which kind of leads, I think, to your past answer there, where you have all these data sets, you have all this technology that allows you and other organizations to create some really crafty data models. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and take more of a e-com answer here, but technically speaking, this will apply to brick and mortar as well on some level. When you have access to, say, advertising data from one API endpoint, and then you also have access to your inventory that's at the retailer's warehouses and from another endpoint, you have the ability to optimize your advertising based off of how much inventory the retailer has. So the quintessential example that you'll see all over the internet is don't spend advertising on something that's driving headfirst into an out of stock scenario, right? So in order to see those things, you have to connect those two different data sources. We could spend an hour talking about all the different ways to connect data set A to data set B, but ultimately I'm just talking about how you can model that out now together, and you can answer those questions a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, much of the data starts in the retailer portals in my world that I work in each week. And I like your statement that technology companies are creating novel approaches to automate the data download process, right? Mm-hmm. And they've re-envisioned the portal as a data source so that you can push these data layers to Power BI, Tableau, Looker, or whatever the visualization tool of choice is.
Right. Yeah, the SaaS world, yes, we all know about the BI companies that are the Goliaths in this space, like you mentioned, Power BI, Tableau, Looker, whatever. But this new breed of SaaS players like Crunchbox and IntentWise and Reason Automation, I could go on and on. There's a lot of players that are now filling that data engineering piece that in some cases may not have existed even 5 years ago. So I think that layer is really starting to get a lot of innovation.
Yeah. And do you see the vendor portals we've seen in a lot of the vendor or retailers that I work with, that they continue to invest in their portals and they continue to rely more on the supplier to learn those tools, right? Like there's more innovation that's coming, but I also see that it's so disparate that you need a tool like Power BI, Tableau, or whatever tool they want to use to create the data model, because you need to bring all those data sets together to give yourself a kind of a 365 view of what's happening in your business, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you go into, say, a retail link or a vendor IQ, and you want to tie together something from like a financial cube over against like a sales transactions cube, that may not have like an easy way to connect the two things. So in order to do it, you have to actually pull them out yourself, model it yourself, and report on it yourself. But if you're taking that extra step, you're giving yourself a competitive advantage when you're speaking to a buyer because you created that new layer of information that doesn't exist without you doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Last question as we come to the end of our time together here. So it's the start of 2023, and I'm wondering where you think the end of 2023 looks like from a data analytics standpoint. What do you see really happening and gaining steam over the next 12 months?
Yeah, I think retailers are seeing how brands are really attempting to use data more efficiently. And I think you're going to see more retailers spin up APIs to provision access to the data, which will in turn, in my opinion, take the crunchboxes of the world. Instead of having to deal with archaic point and click systems to get data out of, you will move into hey, we'll call the API for you and we'll drop it off in your database space. So I think that's going to be a big inflection point on how data is passed from point A to point B. And then once that happens and data becomes more reliable, you'll continue to have the adoption on the BI side of brands. So what we'll be able to do then is take that point of sale data stick it right next to our internal wholesale data, and theoretically have a 360-degree view of the customer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty awesome. Great stuff. Well, Scott, thanks for sharing your thoughts on your article. We'll include a link to your article in our LinkedIn live drop here and on the podcast, which you can find on your local podcast app. Appreciate your time today. Look forward to getting together next month when we'll talk about another article that you have in the works.
All right, sounds good, Doug. Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much.